current implementation of life expectancy on my phone. Now the screen got out as well as on my wrists. So I searched for something that would constrain time. Time already is constrained. So I probably will die at a certain point in the future. And if I now have 10 minutes, then I also often notice that if I now have 10 minutes and I only have 10 minutes and I know that there's a hard cutoff, that I work more intensely on the problem. So it seems to be the case that constraining time, at least for the purpose of using it as a tool, enables me to use my time more efficiently. Also because there is a point. What this also now gives me back is that at this point in time, I have kind of a point that in time I can reach, after which I don't have to do the task any longer. So in terms of working out, for example, this could be that after 40 minutes, I just cut off the workout. It doesn't matter how many exercises are still left, I just cut it off. And so my body also knows that we only have to work out 40 minutes and then it can kind of rest again. What this also enables me is to maybe drive the last 2 minutes additionally hard because I just know there's this cutoff. I just know it and therefore I can also optimize for it. Now, if constraining time is already working on this smaller scale, why not use it on a day? Why not use it on a week? Why not make a plan for the next year, for example? It does not have to be a very detailed plan, and the plan probably changes along the way anyway, but why not plan something like a holiday in 3 months already? Many people already do this. One could also think of a even longer term, but the longer the time duration is, the more complicated it is to then kind of predict. And because it is not only complicated, but in this case also complex, because there are things one just cannot really predict. So outside of the scope of the mental model, but also out of one's influence, kind of uncontrollable variables one could think of, the harder it becomes to predict anything and the less useful the planning actually also gets, one could argue. So now, what if one takes this thing that is constraining my life anyway, which is my life expectancy, and just put a number on it? Now, of course, this number could change, but it's probably not 1 billion years, and it's also probably not 10 minutes. So something maybe in between. So the argument that just because something is not very predictable does not mean it's not predictable at all. Of course, I will live probably. It's like there is just a probability, and the Gaussian curve, it's not a Gaussian curve, but I don't know if it's a Gaussian curve, but let's just call it the distribution curve, is probably in terms of the probability of how long I'm going to live. If I am like closing in on 30 right now, and then there are like maybe 30 years that are left to live, and maybe it's 40 years, and so there is maybe a distribution that I can just model out based on different data. Maybe it's population-based data. There is also the difficulty in terms of predicting one's life expectancy, that one does not know when the current cohort one is part of actually dies. So one maybe takes the last cohort and then tries to predict based on this. So there are kind of different life expectancies. Nonetheless, how can I now implement this? And actually, instead of having only the time and the date, and maybe also the week, which already positions me in my year, and then if there are only 40 years left, then I only need to kind of figure out how many 40 years there are left. So how many years there are left. So now I have, in total, I think mostly 4 different solutions. They can be categorized in kind of a fixed date, which, because there are so many different variables which I cannot really predict, I just said, okay, what is the most reasonable date that is also fairly simple? It's not really a date, it's just how long am I gonna live. The assumption I have now is how long I am gonna live in the state I'm currently in. So if I'm old and incapable and I can barely go to the toilet, then this is not a very useful state. Now I might still be alive, and this then might be binned into the category lifespan. What I am kind of targeting is health span. So in the current state, how many years do I have still left? Because these are years I can still use and also therefore kind of at least plan for. Now, I probably am not dying at 25, mostly because I'm already older than 25. So maybe, what if I'm using a heuristic, which would be a multiple of 1, of 2, or maybe 3, but mostly I found myself using 1, 2, or 5, and then going into the decimal system. So what I can do is I can say how many years I have left, or how many years I have left, or I can say, okay, what is my health span? Now, to answer this question, I can now turn for one to data, and I can basically, maybe ideally, establish a system that kind of updates its predictions based on metrics that are observed on me. So one seeming solution to this is taking data that's recorded already kind of continuously on my watch, but maybe also on my other watch, because I have both a Galaxy Watch as well as a Garmin Fenix 7S Pro, and kind of maybe base life expectancy on this. Garmin has already a score, not a score, but a fitness age. Now the idea of the age is that you are as fit as someone who is population-based average, 18 for example. Now I recently heard Peter Attia talk about this, and Peter Attia talks a lot about longevity and health span, and the example he used was, I think, in terms of rhetorics, not very convincing. So he recently said that he did a couple of fitness tests with a company that had video setup or something like this, or a video setup or something like this, and it gave him a mobility age of, I don't know, 27. And then he mentioned that, are you telling me that I am moving as agile as I was at age 27? And the answer is no. And Peter Attia, I am probably totally wrong on this, but it's a population-based average mostly, or it seems to be that's what's usually used. So Peter Attia in this case was only moving as agile as an average 27-year-old, but not he as 27-year-old, which is also fairly hard for a system like this probably to predict. So if Garmin tells me I am fitness age 18, then this does not mean that I am as fit as I was actually at age 18, and also there are probably a couple of other factors which might influence this result. So, of course, one needs to take this with a caveat, but it also does not give me a fitness age of 118, or 3 billion, or minus 3,000, or 0.0001, or with I don't know how many zeros behind this, but it gives me a fitness age of 18. Now one could take this and put this in relation to the current age, and of course there are multiple caveats with evolving technology like this, but I could also say, okay, that's nice that I have a fitness age 18. I can also then take a look at my blood age, or my inside age with Inside Tracker, which I already did, which puts me at 38, or 37.5, which rounded up is 38, which is a little bit above my current age of 28. Now, in terms of health span, so this would be kind of already something, but that's not giving me a date. Of course I can then calculate. I can just take the average. Yeah, what average now? Should I take the world population average? Should I take the population of Europe, for example? Should I further subdivide? Should I maybe also take gene testing into account? And then it already becomes maybe quite specific, but maybe also, again, am I accounting for too many things, and would a simpler algorithm maybe actually get a better outcome? And of course now one tries to answer all of these questions. So what I have now reverted to is VO2 max as well as resting heart rate. I can, also because I can put both of them onto my wrist. So the first iteration of this project was to get a couple of values like these onto my wrist. To my knowledge, or Garmin has its fitness age. Samsung recently introduced something that is an AGE index, which nobody seems to really know what it is about, but it seems to be advanced glycanation or glycogenation products or end products, which then also maybe are slightly related to biological aging. But as of now, Samsung does not have an equivalent to a fitness age or something like this. Now, what seems to be somewhat predictive of longevity and also health span is VO2 max. So this seems to be the first of all, VO2 max serves kind of as a proxy for physical fitness, and in this case mostly for cardiovascular fitness. At least to my understanding, I could be totally wrong. Maybe read Peter Attia's Outlive on this, but not my videos, or don't watch my videos. Nonetheless, what I have found is that I can get both of these, at least the resting heart rate of the last 7 days, which it might be better if the average was a little bit more long term. And I actually do take a look at the yearly average for inputting it into a different biological age calculation, and also would ideally prefer a VO2 max average that is the yearly average, but currently I can only have the current VO2 max as Garmin shows it. And so on my wrist now I have, which I might have showed in the beginning already, because otherwise, you might have watched all of this and never even seen this. So I have the 46, which is my resting heart rate for the last 7 days, and then the 57, which is my current VO2 max as estimated by Garmin. Now these two numbers I can now derive maybe with a easy calculation. I could derive a age from. So because resting heart rate, it's better the lower, and VO2 max, it's better the higher, the calculations need to be different, and they can also not really be related, at least in some very simple formula that the one then can calculate in one's head. So what I have arrived on is that I just say, okay, my VO2 max is now 57. What this could result in is, there could be multiple different things, but what I have kind of landed on is that I just say, okay, I say a VO2 max of 50 would be fairly nice, so I take my current VO2 max and I deduct the 50. There seems to be also a threshold upon which, or below which, in this case, one is not able to carry out daily functions like carrying groceries anymore, which depends also on the sex. And this could be anywhere from maybe 20 to 30 or 35 or something like this. Let's just say 20 to 35. I'm also not the person to ask about this, but one could then say, okay, I just want to have a functional VO2 max, not a functional VO2 max, but a VO2. So my VO2 max serves as a functional proxy, not as a functional proxy, as a proxy for function for kind of my cardiovascular health. Also not only my cardiovascular, but also my respiratory health, and combined my cardiorespiratory fitness. So I could then deduct basically the threshold. In this case, I could take the 50, for example, and say I have 7 years left to live, which now might be very inaccurate. Nonetheless, there might be also, if I have a given health span calculation, there might also be risks which I did not account for, but maybe I want to account for these. Maybe I am diving because I'm run over by a truck tomorrow, or maybe I'm taking part in something like a not approved cure for something, and then I die of the consequences of doing this. And so there might also be risks that I want to already imply into this. So now the 7 years is fairly sparse, and it's also maybe not that useful. One could take a different approach and maybe say 100 minus 57, which is the years left to live. But then, does it actually work? I need to think about this. No, in this case not. It should be the other way around, because the lower the resting heart rate in this case, so with resting heart rate it could be maybe something like 100 minus the resting heart rate. So the lower one's resting heart rate is, the better then, or the more years one would have either left to live or would reach this age. So one could take now 100 minus the 46 and say, okay, I'm getting either 54 years old or I would have 54 years left to live, since 54 is already putting me at a very high age. Because 28 plus 54, it probably would make more sense to say, okay, that's the age I will be reaching, and not the years I have left to live. With VO2 max, maybe the easiest would be that one takes the VO2 max and then says, okay, the current VO2 max is either now the years one is left to live, or the years one is getting, or one dies at. And so it could be that at age 57 I die, which also would align kind of with the baseline idea which I had, which is to just put a 50 on basically my health span. So at age 50 I might die. So if I now increase my VO2 max up to 57, and maybe 3 to 4 years ago it was like, and even 1 year ago it was as low as 48 or something like this, I think, or maybe 51. Before I got the Garmin, there was a time where it was as low as 42, at least approximated by Samsung Health. Now, one could say that, therefore, a very simple calculation, I take my current VO2 max, I subtract the 50, and then I get basically the years I have left to live, because I assume I have a baseline health span of 50 if I'm just aging normally, and I also include all these risks. Of getting run over by a truck, or maybe there's World War III or something like this, which I want to include already, and I want to include. Now, on my phone. So on the Galaxy Watch I do not have something like this. On the Garmin though, every time I look at my time, I can see how many years now I have kind of left to live. I just take the 50 and say, okay, 7 years. Now, I also now wanted another implementation of this, or an implementation of this that actually gives me a readout in terms of how many hours, how many weeks. Now, the easiest I found is the day. The day is the unit that I can kind of mentally anticipate. I can say, okay, the next day. I can already plan for the next day. The next week already is more difficult. The next month, I don't even know what is in 2 weeks sometimes. At least regarding specific events. What if in 2 weeks the thing I had planned, what if somebody drops out and then I cannot play basketball with this somebody, and so on and so forth. So there might be different things. Also, if there might be a lot of things, so basically the more one goes into the future, the more unpredictable the future becomes, it seems to be. So what I've landed on is, if I take a look at my phone, then I have these numbers, which I now realize also should have showed in the beginning. What are these numbers? The first one is the time, the second one is the date, so this is just a normal clock. Then I have an app, this is called Counter Widget Things or something like this. There are a couple of different apps. Now, what I've landed on is to have the days, the remaining days, up until the year in which I will turn 50. And these are the days I have left. And 3 days ago, it was 3 days more. And I took a look at this only a couple of years ago, and it was like 9,000. And now it's not 9,000 anymore. So basically, the days are ticking away. And every time I take a look at this, I'm like, okay, what am I doing today? What have I done today? And this is the question I wanted to introduce or to induce. And every time I take a look at my watch, I also know that if I had a higher VO2 max, which now also correlates actually with higher cardiorespiratory fitness, which also correlates with better health and therefore longer lifespan, or not necessarily with better health, but it correlates with longer lifespan or longer health span. So this is the time I have, and this is the time I have if I don't improve my VO2 max or my fitness. And it should be as easy as this. And so I experimented also now with 2 additional things, which is the number of weeks I have left, in this case 1,100. There is also a graph made by, or a web page made by WeightButY, or WeightButY's Tim Urban, who is a blogger and who made life basically in weeks, and then you can take a look at this. I actually took a look at this, and I also took a look at a few people close to me, and then it's like, okay, someone's life is that close to basically ending. And I can also see how my life is close to ending, because this, what is left here, this gray bar, is basically how much there is left. And of course the circle in the beginning was full, and now it is not full. So basically I'm over half-life. Now the 2 additional things are the weeks and the months. I already said this, but they unfortunately come not rounded. I would prefer if they were. And so these are the 2 implementations I could think of. A reminder that time is constrained, and I wanted to induce this thought every time I took a look on my watch. What am I doing? How am I contributing to what I want to do with the rest of my time?